My mother sent money home from Dubai for 12 years and missed every birthday. And in March I found out she has been living 90 minutes away. She has a husband, 2 stepchildren, and a standing order she set up so the postmarks would look right. The call came in at 6:10 on a Tuesday. A hard calving at a place called Kilcairn that I had never been to, 90 minutes north, because their own vet was off and the practice up there rang round. That is normal. Large animal work is a rota of favors between people who will never meet, and I have driven 2 hours at 4 in the morning for a cow belonging to a man whose name I have never learned. I got there at 7:20. It was a good farm, tidy, the kind where the gates shut properly, and it was a malpleasantation, and it took me about 50 minutes, and the calf lived, which does not always happen. And I was standing in the yard at 8:30 with my arms wet to the shoulder washing off at the tap, when the farmhouse door opened and my mother came out with 2 mugs of tea. She was wearing a padded coat I did not recognize. She was wearing reading glasses on a cord, which she has never done in her life. Behind her in the doorway there was a girl of about 15 in school uniform eating toast. And my mother walked 11 steps across her own yard toward a vet she had asked her neighbor to ring for. And she got to about 4 feet away, and she stopped. I want to tell you what she said, because everybody assumes it was an apology or a scream, and it was neither, and I have never got over it. She said, "You've got taller," which is not possible. I was 23 when she left, and I am 35. And nobody gets taller, and she said it because it was the only sentence in the world that could come out. And the girl in the doorway said, "Mum, whose car is that?" And my mother said, over her shoulder, in a completely normal voice, "It's the vet, love." I dried my arms. I put the calving jack in the boot, and I put the bucket back, and I wrote up the visit on the pad on the passenger seat, because I always write it up before I drive, and my hands were fine, they were completely steady, which I have since been told is a thing that happens. And then I drove 90 minutes home and opened the surgery at 11, and did afternoon consults and a dog spay, and I did not tell one single person for 9 days. She went in 2013 and the practice came to me. That is the family story, and I have told it about 400 times. At weddings, to reps, to new graduates. Ilona Hale, mixed practice vet, 31 years, built the place out of a converted stable block in 1994, and in 2013 her marriage ended and she took a contract with an equine hospital in Dubai, 3 years initially, because the money was extraordinary, and because my father had left her with debts I was never told the size of. And she handed the practice to her 23-year-old daughter who had qualified 11 months earlier. Everybody in this valley thought she was mad, and it worked. That is the thing. I was 23 and I had no business being in charge of a 5-vet practice, and I made every mistake there is, including one in 2015 that I still think about at 3 in the morning, and that cost a farmer 4 cows. And I got through it because a woman called Sheena Corey, our practice manager, who is 62 now, and who has been there since 1999, effectively ran the business for a year and let me think I was doing it. And the money came, every month, without fail, for 12 years, into the practice account, between £1,100 and £2,000 depending on the month, referenced maintenance. And the cards came 4 times a year. Here is what 12 years of that does to a person, and I need you to have it before I go on, because otherwise the ending is unearned. I defended her, constantly, to my aunt who thinks she abandoned me, to Sheena, who never said a word against her, and whose silence I have only recently learned to read, to a man I nearly married in 2019 who said, at a wedding, that he found it strange that she had never come back for a funeral, and who was right, and who I did not speak to for 4 days. I built an entire identity out of being the daughter who understood. There are things about my mother that are true, and that the last 2 years have not touched. She is the best large animal vet this county has had in 50 years, and I am not being generous. I have read her clinical notes from 1997 and they are better than mine. She did a cesarean on a heifer in a byre at Tralwyn in a power cut in 2001 by the light of 2 cars, and the animal and the calf both lived. And there are men in their 70s who will tell you that story unprompted. She taught me to palpate on a Sunday afternoon when I was 15, and she never once told me I was doing it wrong, she said. Again, about 40 times, which is the same thing, and is not. And when my father left in 2012, she did not say one word against him to me, not one, in a whole year. And I thought that was strength, and I now think it was a rehearsal. Because the other thing that is true about my mother is that she does not explain herself to anybody, ever, about anything. And for 23 years I read that as dignity. And it turns out it is just a door with nothing written on it, and you can put whatever you like on the other side. And in the 9th year I put a photograph of her on the wall in reception, the one of her in 1996 in a byre with her arm in a cow up to the elbow. And I have watched clients look at that photograph while they wait, for 4 years, and I put it there myself. The cards came 4 times a year, birthday, Christmas, Easter, and one in September, for no reason anybody ever explained, and they were postcards, always, never letters, always with a stamp from the Emirates, and I have every single one of them in a biscuit tin, 48 of them, and on the 11th day I sat on the floor of my kitchen and went through the tin with a magnifying glass I use for reading ear tags. Here is what 48 postcards look like when you finally look at them. The handwriting is hers, the stamps are real, the postmarks are real, and the franking is identical on all 48, the same office, the same 3-digit code, over 12 years, which is not how postal systems work, because offices change codes, and machines get replaced, and a person who is actually living somewhere posts a card from wherever she happens to be. Then I looked at the pictures. 22 of the 48 are the same 6 images in rotation. Not similar. The same 6, from the same rack. The way you get when somebody buys a bundle of 40 postcards in one go in one shop on one afternoon. It took me 1 evening and £11 to find the rest of it, because there is a category of business that exists to do precisely this, and it is not even illegal, and it advertises openly. It is called a remail service. You write your cards, you send them in a bundle to a company in the destination country. They hold them and post them individually on the dates you specify. They are used by expatriates who are homesick, by companies doing marketing, and, apparently, by mothers. I want to say what those 9 days were, between the yard at Kilcairn and telling anybody, because they were not a breakdown and they were not grief, and I have never seen the state described anywhere. I worked. I did 11 farm visits, 2 dehornings, a prolapse at midnight, and a full week of small animal consults. And I was, by every account I have since collected, completely normal. And Sheena says the only thing she noticed was that I stopped putting sugar in my tea. What was actually happening is that I was running the last 12 years again from the start. Every conversation, at speed, in the car, looking for the moment I should have caught it. And the honest answer is that there was no moment, because a woman who sends money is not a woman you check, and that is the whole design. Money going the wrong way is what made it hold. If she had sent nothing, I would have gone looking in the 2nd year, and I found the company by searching the 3-digit franking code, which took 9 minutes, and then I did the thing that has become my entire personality, which is that I wrote to them, on practice letterhead, as a customer with a query about a service, and asked what their retention period was for client instructions. 7 years. And I have never once needed to use that, because 2 days later Sheena Corey knocked on my office door at 6:30 in the evening and shut it behind her, which she has never done, and put an envelope on my desk, and said, "I've had this since 2016 and I have been sick about it every day since, and if you sack me I'll go quietly." Inside it were 3 of the same 6 postcard images, blank, and a compliment slip from the Remail Company, and a note in my mother's hand that says, "Sheena, do these ones for September, thank you I." And Sheena Corey sat in the chair opposite me at 62 years old and said, "She told me you'd have left. She said if you knew you'd go off and work in a small animal place in a city and this place would shut and 11 people would lose their jobs." And I believed her, and every year it got harder to be a person who had believed her. I have never owned 1 brick of that building. That is the sentence that turned this from a story about a mother into something with a courtroom at the end of it, and I found it by doing my own due diligence on my own life, in April, at the age of 35, which is an experience I would not wish on anybody, because once you find one thing you check everything, and what I checked was the title, and Hale Veterinary Surgery, the converted stable block, the yard, the 2 acres and the porta-cabin, is registered to Ilona the 1000th. Hale, sole proprietor, and always has been, and there is no partnership agreement, no transfer, no trust, nothing. What there is since 2013 is a document called a management agreement, 4 pages, which appoints me as manager of the practice, and in the 12 years since, I have taken out 3 loans to keep that place alive, and every one of them was secured on the goodwill and equipment of a business I do not own, and one of them, the big one, the £94,000 in 2020 that bought the new digital radiography and paid the staff through a year when farmers could not pay their bills, has a personal guarantee on it, and the personal guarantee is mine. And when I went through 12 years of accounts, which took me 4 weekends, here is how I appear in them. I am a salaried assistant, that is the line, assistant veterinary surgeon, and the salary is the salary of a first-year assistant adjusted for inflation, and the profit of that practice, 12 years of it, every year including the ones that nearly killed me, has been distributed to the proprietor, and the proprietor is my mother, and the sum, across 12 years, is £411,000, and every month out of that, between £1,100 and £2,000 came back to me, referenced maintenance, and I called it my mother sending money home. She was not sending money home. She was drawing the profits of a business I ran and returning me an allowance, and I was so grateful for it that I put her photograph on the wall. Ruaridh Gorman has done our book since 1998. He is 67. He has an office over a saddlery in the town. He does the accounts for about 1/3 of the farms in this valley, and when I qualified he took me to lunch and told me I had the best head for figures of anybody in my family, which I have thought about a great deal since April. He drew the management agreement. He drew it in 2013 and he has filed 12 sets of accounts on it, and he also, and this is the part that took a specialist forensic accountant 11 weeks and £11,000 to lay out properly, incorporated a company in 2014 called Kilcairn Estates Limited, whose registered office is his own office, and whose directors are Ilona Hale and Struan Baird, and which owns the farm my mother came out of that morning, and which was funded, in its first 3 years, by a director's loan account credited in monthly amounts that reconcile, to the pound, against the drawings from the veterinary practice. He built both households, 1 accountant, 1 office over a saddlery, 2 families, 12 years, and the reason none of it ever surfaced is that the only person in a position to notice was being paid as an assistant and had been told the money was coming the other way. And when I finally understood it, in May, in a rented meeting room in a city with a forensic accountant and a solicitor, the thing that made me put my head down on the table was not the 400,000. It was that Ruaridh Gorman had sat in my office every March for 12 years with the draft accounts, and had gone through them with me line by line, and had been patient with me, and had explained things twice when I did not follow, and had never once, not one single time in 12 years, said the words, "You understand this is not your practice." She wrote to me in May, not a postcard, 9 pages, by hand, first class, from an address 90 minutes away, and it arrived on a Tuesday between a lame ram and a bull that needed testing, and I read it standing up in the drugstore, and then I put it in the drawer and did the bull. It is the only real letter I have ever had from my mother, and it is very good, which is the problem with it. It says she thinks about me every day, which I believe. It says she could not come back after the first year because after the first year there was no version of returning that was not a confession, which I also believe, and which is the truest sentence anybody in this story has ever produced. And then on page 7, it says that she had always intended the practice to come to me eventually, and that these things are complicated, and that Ruaridh had always said the timing had to be right. And that is where I stopped believing it, because I had had the title register on my desk for 3 weeks by then, and because a woman who intends a building to come to somebody spends £4 and looks at whose name is on it. I did not reply. What I did instead, that evening, was ring my Aunt Morag, who has said for 12 years that my mother abandoned me, and who I have contradicted every single time, sometimes coldly, once at a funeral, and I said, "You were right." And Morag Hale, who is 71 and does not do feelings, said, "I know, love. I've been waiting 12 years for you to be able to afford it." Struan Baird came to the surgery in June. That is the loud one, and he did exactly what the loud one always does, which is that he arrived at 11:30 on a Friday, in the waiting room, in front of 4 clients and a whippet, and shouted that I was harassing his wife, that I had put my mother in the hospital with her nerves, and that everybody in this valley knew what I was after. And Sheena Corey stood up behind the desk, 62 years old, and said, "Mr. Baird, there's a queue." And then, when he did not stop, she said, "And who's the vet here then, you or her? Because there's a whippet needs seeing." I have thought about that sentence more than any other in the whole business. The show is the 2nd week of July. Our county show is 2 days and about 11,000 people, and the practice has had a stand under the same tree since 1996, and on the Friday there is a members' lunch in the pavilion, 240 farmers and their families, and speeches, and a presentation of the Long Service Awards. My mother was there. I want to be clear that I did not know she would be, because Kilcairn is in the next county and she has spent 12 years not being anywhere I was, but Struan Baird shows black-faced tups, and so she was in a pavilion at a table 9 feet from mine, in the padded coat, and by then everybody in that tent knew, because it is a valley and Sheena Corey has a sister. So I asked the chairman for the microphone before the awards, and he is a farmer called Adam Prowse whose cattle I have looked after since I was 24, and who took 2 seconds to decide, and what he said was, "Go on." I did it in order, and I did not raise my voice. First the postcards, 48 of them, in the biscuit tin, on the table, and the 6 repeated images, and the Remail Company's compliment slip, and I said what a remail service is and how much it costs. And I said 12 years of birthdays came out of one shop in one afternoon. then the standing order mandate, then the title register, 1 page, £4 from the land registry, showing who owns the building I have kept the lights on in for 12 years, then the 12 years of accounts, and I read out my own job title, assistant veterinary surgeon, and then the drawings figure, £411,000, and then the £94,000 personal guarantee with my signature on it, and 240 farmers, who are the least demonstrative people in the British Isles, made a noise I have never heard in that tent. Somebody at the back, a dairy farmer called Ewan Petrie, said, "Hang on, you signed a personal guarantee on a building that isn't yours?" And I said yes, in 2020, at 30, on advice from the practice's accountant. And Ewan Petrie said, "That's not advice," and sat down, and that was the moment the tent turned. And it was not my sentence that did it, it was his. Then Kilcairn Estates Limited, the incorporation date, the registered office, the 2 directors, and the director's loan reconciliation. And I said, the office is over the saddlery. It has been over the saddlery for 27 years, and about a third of you in this tent send your books to it. Ruaridh Gorman was 2 tables away, and he stood up and said, "Bryony, you are misrepresenting a perfectly ordinary structure." And I said the thing I had written on the back of a drug ledger in June and carried in the pocket of my waterproof for a month. I said, "Ruaridh, you sat in my office every March for 12 years explaining my own accounts to me slowly. There is a word for a man who is patient with somebody he is robbing, and it is not accountant. Thank you for listening to Channel Crystal Novel." And my mother stood up. She did not defend herself, and she did not cry, and she has never in her life done either. And she said, into a room of 240 people who have all known her since 1994, "I did leave. Everything she has said is true, and I am not going to stand here and dress it." And then she said, "I was 39, and I was finished, and there was a man, and I made a decision in 1 week that I have spent 12 years administering." Administering, that is the word she used, in a tent, about her daughter. The transfer completed in November. The practice, the building, the 2 acres and the porta-cabin are mine. And it took 4 months, and it was not a court case in the end, because the moment the forensic report went to her solicitor, the negotiation became about how fast rather than whether. She transferred the freehold, wrote off the loan account, and paid £210,000, which is roughly half of what she drew, and about a third of what I was advised to ask for. And I took it, because I was 35 and tired, and because litigation would have run 3 years and the practice would have had to be run by somebody through all of it, and that somebody was me. Ruaridh Gorman was reported to his institute in the autumn, excluded in the spring after a hearing that lasted 4 days. And the criminal referral is still with the police and will, I am reliably told, come to nothing, because the management agreement was a real document, and I signed it at 23 without advice. And that is not a crime, it is a tragedy with a signature on it. 19 farms have moved their books, and 2 of them found things when the new firm went back through, and one of those is a family I have known my whole life, who had been paying for a lease on a shed they already owned since 2009. The Institute's decision notice runs to 11 pages and is on their website and names him, and it is the single most read document in this valley. And a farmer showed it to me on his phone in a crush pen in April while I was blood testing, which is where farmers read everything. The bank reviewed the personal guarantee and released it in the winter, without being asked, which I did not expect and which somebody there had to decide to do. And the vet's governing body wrote to every practice in the country in the spring about ownership structures and management agreements for newly qualified vets taking over family practices. which is a 2-page letter that would have saved me 12 years, and which I have framed, badly, in the staff kitchen, next to the rota. He has closed the office over the saddlery, and the saddlery has taken the upstairs for storage. Struan Baird is not, as far as I can tell, a bad man, and he did not know about the practice at all, and he found that out in a tent in July at the same time as 240 other people. And I have some sympathy for him that I did not expect and cannot really afford. Sheena Corey did not resign, and was not sacked, and is now a partner, which she resisted for 9 months on the grounds that she is not a vet, and which she agreed to when I pointed out that she had been running the business since 2013 and might as well be paid for it. The photograph came off the wall in reception in April. I did not burn it. It is in the tin with the postcards, in the drawer in the office, and about twice a year I get it out and look at a woman in 1996 with her arm in a cow, and the thing I feel is not what I expected, and it is not forgiveness, and there is no word for it. And then there is the last part, which came out of the disclosure in September, and which nobody else in this valley knows. There is a letter in Gorman's file, dated the 9th of March 2016, from my mother, 3 years in, and it is 1 paragraph long, and it asks him to prepare a transfer of the practice and the freehold to her daughter, and underneath it, clipped to it, is his file note of the telephone call he made in reply, and the file note says, in his own shorthand, that he advised against transfer at this time given the client's exposure on the Kilcairn purchase and the borrowing profile, and that the client accepted the advice. She tried. Once, in 2016, when I was 26 and had just got through the worst year of my life, my mother sat down and tried to give me the thing that was already mine, and a man in an office over a saddlery talked her out of it in a phone call that lasted, according to his own time record, 11 minutes, because a farm in the next county needed the money more. I have not shown her that letter. She does not know that I have it. And I have worked out that the reason I have not shown it to her is not kindness, and it is not strategy, and it is this: as long as she does not know I have it, I get to be the only person alive who knows that she tried, and I am not ready to give that away. Sheena asked me in January whether I would ever put the photograph back up, and I said no, and she said good, because I've had a better one printed. And it is a picture of the whole practice on the steps from last summer, 11 of us, including the 2 students and Sheena's dog, and it has been in reception since February, and 3 separate clients have asked whether the woman on the end is my mother, and she is not. She is our new graduate, and she is 23, which is the age I was, and I have made absolutely certain she has a contract she has read. She sends nothing now. No money, no cards, no postmarks. In April she sent a message that said, if you ever want to meet the girls properly they would like it. And I have not answered it, and it has been 11 months, and I open it about once a fortnight. The calving jack in the boot of that car is the one she bought in 2004, and it is older than my whole career, and I could replace it for £200, and I will not. So here is what I want to know from you, since you have been in that yard with me the whole way. Did she go far enough, or was she still too merciful? Comment justice if the ending was perfect. Comment harder if you wanted an even colder revenge. Your comments decide how ruthless the next ending should be. Like and subscribe if you want to be here for the next